President Akufo-Addo has touted government's efforts at stabilizing the economy despite the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Delivering the State of the Nation address in Parliament, the President said government will implement prudent measures to quicken the fiscal consolidation program that will put the economy on a strong growth path.
We set to work quickly, and I'm glad to say that we've been able to stabilize the economy, exit satisfactorily the IMF program, and restore confidence in the economy. At the end of 2019, the economy was characterized by strong growth in response to implementation of government flagship programs, single-digit inflation, reduced fiscal deficits with 3 consecutive years of primary surpluses, relatively stable exchange rate, significant improvement in the current account with 3 consecutive years of trade surpluses, strong foreign exchange reserve buffers, and markedly reduced lending rates.
President, there, what is the true state of our economy? Let's discuss this with Yao Latte, who is head of Financial Advisory Unit of Deloitte. Happy New Year to you, Yao, and thanks for joining us tonight.
Yes, many happy returns, Daryl.
Great. I want
to have me.
Yeah, I want to pick your thoughts on what you think is the true state of our economy. Does the president capture it well enough?
Yes, I think fairly the president captures it, particularly on the economic front. You would appreciate that around about the time that his government came to office, there were a few challenges, and it's usually the trend that we see when we do have elections. So in election years, subsequent years, you have some challenges with the economy. But that being said, I think the government inherited an economy and they pursued some policies to reverse some of the challenges that he had. So maybe to summarize it, if you look at GDP, for instance, before around about 2017, GDP was about 8.1%. It grew to 6.3% and further to 6.5%. So on average, our GDP over the last 3 years before 2020 was about 7%. That was remarkable if you compare that to our peers within the West Africa or Sub-Saharan Africa. That was remarkable, so remarkable achievement. But then the COVID pandemic hit, and our GDP estimate of 2020, which was about 6.8%, was revised to 2.6%, further revised to 0.9%, and currently, as we speak, we are looking at reversing that to about 1.9%. Pundit also puts that at a recession. So for the first time in over decades, Ghana is going to record a recession this year, or 2020. That is to fairly balance it. You realize that before 2020, the economy was growing remarkably at about 7% on average. But 2020, when we were hit with the pandemic, it saw a reversal. And this reversal was mainly as a result of shortfall in revenues from oil, income that we are expecting, indirect taxes from import duties and stuff like that. I think on the other front, inflation also declined. So inflation as of 2017 was about 11.8%, declining to 9.4% in 2018, and further declining to 7.9%. And as we speak, it's still run about a single-digit inflation. So that's also a remarkable achievement by the government. I think also on the exchange rate, the cedi has been fairly stable over the same period. I think what we haven't managed well, which we would rightly put before government, is our debt. Our debt to GDP ratio from 2017 was about 56.1%. It rose to 58% in 2018, and then 2019 it's about 60.1%. And as we speak, our debt to GDP ratio is over 70%. So fairly, the government has managed the GDP growth well, inflation very well, and exchange rate has been fairly stable. But on the flip side, I think we haven't managed very well our debt. That is as a result of several factors, including the pandemic. But I think that going forward, we should put in the right measures to manage our debt. That's where I think we didn't score very well. But on the other economic front, government has managed to some extent very well.
And that's what some other people are questioning, the fact that the president didn't talk about our debt situation at all when he made that speech. But again, you make the point about the pandemic, which we didn't expect that the government had to deal with. And it's not just Ghana. So many countries are experiencing a recession at this point. And so the president talks about prudent measures to quicken the fiscal consolidation program, i.e. reducing government deficits and debt accumulation. And we expect that the finance minister will give further details when he appears before Parliament in March. How would you advise the finance minister to approach it?
Yeah, I think when the government presented the appropriation budget, which is like a 3-month budget because we are getting into elections, one of the points that was raised at the time was about how we manage our debt. And I think there was this big story about our debt to GDP ratio. One of the ways that government should be looking at is to taking advantage of our debt opportunities that we have with our developing countries. So some developed countries have offered to restructure debts for developing countries. And I think that is one of the ways that we should pursue because our debt to GDP ratio at the rate at which it is growing is unsustainable. And going forward, government has hinted that it's going to the capital market to borrow additional about 3 billion on the capital market. That is also an expensive source. So we should be looking at diversifying our income and also diversifying our borrowing sources. If we do not diversify our borrowing sources, I think the borrowing sources that we have are quite expensive. Our interest payment is the second most significant expenditure next to compensation. If you continue on that trend, it will be difficult to spend on other areas such as capital expenditure, which the economy badly needs at this time following the pandemic. So we should also diversify our borrowing sources in as much as we are looking at diversifying our income. And I think that's how I would advise the Minister of Finance to look at diversifying our borrowing sources. Yeah.
We just have a minute on this one. And so the president talks about spurring economic growth. And so for you, what are the growth areas to look out for? And does it include the agri sector?
Excellent. I think agri sector is one of the areas that has survived the pandemic, I would say. Most of the flagship programs implemented by government, I think the agri sector has been one of the successful. Planting for Food and Jobs has been one of the successful flagship programs. And we expect government to invest a lot more in that. Because if you look at our economy, the other sectors are prone to suffer demand by the Western economy. So now we have some countries going back on lockdown. So demand for oil is going to struggle. It's not going to go as high as expected. But agriculture is one of the areas that we should take advantage of. Same with the mining sector. We should also take advantage of the mining because a lot of investors are finding safe haven in investing in gold. So as much as we are investing in the agri sector, the mining sector, particularly the production of gold, is one area that we can take advantage of. These two sectors are key to driving our growth going forward. The others will fluctuate a little bit, given the position that we find ourselves in. Okay. But we should support agriculture and we should support mining. Thank you. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. It's always a pleasure speaking with you on Business Live. Yao Latte, head of the Financial Advisory Unit of Deloitte. A pleasure you could speak with us. Thank you so much.